and I'm like, oh, yeah, we probably
Hello. This announcement is to let you know that there are Spanish interpretation services available for those. For if there's anyone here requiring Spanish interpretation services, the interpreter's booth is towards the table, towards the back on the right side. Buenas tardes. Este comunicado es para informarles que hay servicios de interpretación para las personas que hablan español. Para alguna persona que necesite de esta ayuda, por favor, búsquenos a las intérpretes. Estamos en la mesa, ubicados en la mesa atrás por la entrada. Gracias.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us live from the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center. Committee members, are you ready to get started? Yes? Is the city staff ready to get started? Technology, are we ready to start recording? The meetings are being recorded. We are live. Okay. That's it.
Okay.
Go ahead, and Susan, bring us in.
Hi, everybody. Welcome this evening. Just a couple of quick opening comments. I'd gone around, and I think the only one I didn't get to talk, I got one to you, right? For district, for y'all, this form, did I? Perfect. Great. I thought I did. I went around to each of you, and Chris and I would like to take about a 30-minute time frame to meet with each of the district groups. So if y'all would just give us your first and second choice based on these times and turn the form back into me, then I will coordinate and make sure that we can have an opportunity to have a 30-minute time slot with each of y'all between now and our next meeting. All of you got this project request form based on Bianca's request. Just if y'all have anything y'all are going to want to submit, please put it on the form. I think we have a staff presentation first, and then we're going to do citizens to be heard. And Chris and I will work through that list.
Thank you. Don't forget to sign the sign-in sheet as it goes around.
All right. Well, thank you. Welcome, everybody, to our second meeting. I just wanted to remind the group that we designed these bond committee meetings to have a certain cadence, certain rhythm to them. The first meeting, you recall, we gave you an orientation. I had our attorneys talk to you about your ethical responsibilities as a committee member. We gave you a presentation, shared with you the bond package that we're proposing. Second meeting, which is today, and third meeting are designed to really get citizen input. So we're going to spend a significant amount of time getting input from different citizen groups, different residents. So, we're going to listen to them today. And then there's time for more group committee discussion, more questions, more requests for information, at that time, some debate possibly. So we left room for that. And so that's the second meeting and the third meeting. And the fourth meeting will be more debate, more deliberation between the group. And that's the meeting where you will vote and make a recommendation to City Council. So some of the other groups, I also staffed the street group on Monday, and they were throwing around, we want to make a motion here, a motion for that. It's fine to discuss those motions, but we didn't advertise the meeting to be one where you would take action. So, it's not fair to the citizens out there that are following the process. They're thinking you're going to vote, take a vote in the fourth meeting. So we want to be fair to them and vote when we said we're going to vote. And the other thing, this was a 4-meeting process. So it's designed for you to gather information and really understand the projects in your first 3 meetings. So when you are taking a vote, you have all that information, to vote on what you think is the best bond package for the city. So just wanted to remind you of how we've set it up. And I'll get a point over there, I think. Sorry. I think I'm pointing in the right direction. So at the last meeting, I shared with you that we had 2 council districts, Council District 8 and Council District 9, that had some district projects that they wanted to swap out. And so I told you, I'm giving you an amount, but it's going to be, there may be a little bit different. So we did get with those council districts this past week. So we have some updates to the numbers. So you can see streets, we'd said it was about 480 million. After we made the changes, it dropped to 477 million. Parks dropped from 274 to 273.5 million. And drainage went up from 162 million to 165 million. So you guys got a little bit more money as a result of those swaps. So I'm going to share with you those changes. On this next slide, you have it with you. I'm not going to go into detail, but you can see the specific projects that were added by those districts. And then you can see on the right-hand side, those projects that were removed. So you take a look at those if you want to see what was added and what was removed. And so here's the bond packages. You know, this is kind of final staff recommendation form, if you will. As I mentioned, streets, 477 million, parks, 273.5 million, drainage, 165 million, and housing stayed the same at 150. Municipal facilities at 61 million, and public safety at 73 million. And you know, one quick thing, I know there's been a lot of back and forth from committee members, you know, contacting your council members contacting staff, some committee members. We know a lot of you guys, we've worked with you throughout the year, so you know us, so you're contacting us, asking us for information. So I want to remind you, you know, the way we've set this up is for you to ask your questions and make your request for information here at this meeting. You can you can email us a request for information. And what we're going to do is at the next meeting, we're going to read that request out loud because we want to be completely transparent. You know, the problem is, you know, we like all of you. We love your passion and we want you to be successful and have all the information. But we don't want the appearance that we're working with, you know, I'm working with my friend Andy Green in D6 because I like him. And, you know, I'm giving him ammunition to go after District 1. Yeah. So don't want to give that appearance. So we ask that, you know, if you submit, we're going to share with the whole group what was requested of us. And then when we send out our memo 48 hours after or 2 business days after, everybody's going to see our answers and everybody's going to see that information that was requested. So that way it's fair. Everybody has access to the same information and we're not working with one, or we don't give the appearance that we're working with one group against another group. So appreciate your understanding with that. And I'm going to turn it over to Razi for some more details.
Thank you, Rod, and good evening, everyone. I am Razi Hosseini, Director, City Engineer for Public Works Department. As I mentioned in first meeting, and as Rod also confirmed today, we were working last 2 weeks with Council District 8 and 9 to change some project. On Council District 8, we changed roadway project and one small project, and we create George Road low water crossing improvement. As you can see on this one, the project scope is going to include culvert installation, channel regrading and widening, and pavement restoration. This is going to allow only for low flow to pass because there is a lot of trees in this area and the neighborhood really doesn't want us to cut a tree and create a deep channel to make sure high flow can pass. This is a good project and we are pleased to announce this one today. The second project was in Council District 9. If you recall, Evans Road, part of our previous presentation was 29.5 million, 10 million from streets, 19 from drainage. We reduced the limit sum and we released the remaining fund to add some other project, which I will be showing you in detail. This is the new project we are adding because of reducing the Evans Road, is Oak Haven area street improvement. This project consists of street reconstruction, storm sewer, culvert crossing, and channelization within subdivision, and also is going to eliminate 2 existing low water crossing. Last project in Council District 9 is a perennial area street and drainage improvement. This project includes the construction and improvement of the diverting the existing flow to underground system. We had a number of the 311 call in this area. That's one of the reasons we are recommending, of course, working with council's office, recommending this project to be part of our 2022 bond. How we have selected this project? We have used a scoring criteria to score each of the project, drainage, streets, park, and other. I like to have Nefi Garza from our office to talk about scoring of the drainage project. Nefi?
Thank you, Razi. Once again, my name is Nefi Garza, Assistant Director for Public Works over stormwater. And thank you for making time to meet with us today. I want to talk a little bit about some of the project eligibility factors that we included when looking at these projects or any projects that we begin, whether it's through our budget or certainly during the bond, or any other projects that we work to try and identify and try and receive funding. I'm real fortunate in that I have a very strong, dedicated group of staff members that I work with who spend a lot of time analyzing and reviewing projects, coming up with these plans to be able to better serve our community when it comes to drainage. One of the, as you can see from here, some of the project eligibility factors include things like downstream impacts. And I'd like to explain to you what that means. Within the city of San Antonio, when any development happens, whether it's public or private, you cannot have an adverse impact to your neighbor. You can't flood your neighbor. And we need to make sure that projects that we are working on does not pass the problem on to anybody downstream. And that's why it's important that we create the proper phases of the project. I'll give you an example. If you're doing a project, and I'm just gonna identify one of the projects that we've been working on for some time that we've been successful in on Ceiling Channel. We had to be, in order to solve the flooding problems on St. Cloud, we have to begin at Woodlawn Lake. And we have to begin there because if we don't, if we do St. Cloud first, we will push the flooding downstream and cause someone else to flood. So we can't do that. So that's why we have to begin downstream and work our way upstream in the case of channels. So downstream impact or a project that's out of phase, skipping a phase, will not score well for us. We have to begin in a proper order to get there. We also look at structural and property flooding. As I mentioned in our last meeting, people will call me and say, my street is flooded. And I say, okay, is it within the curb? And they say, yes, it's within curb to curb. Well, ladies and gentlemen, they're designed to do that. Just wait 30 minutes, it'll go away. But if the flooding exceeds the curb and goes onto the sidewalk and into private property, that is a problem. So in some of the projects here where you see property flooding, where you see road flooding, that's because water has exceeded the curb, exceeded the sidewalk, and is impacting private property. Those areas, we need to take care of those. They will score high in our system. As road impacts, I mentioned to you. The other thing we do with regard to road impacts, we always look at the area, not just a microscopic view, but we're looking at the entire area. And we ask the question, can an emergency vehicle get to the neighborhood when it's flooding? God forbid somebody needs medical attention during a flood. Can an emergency vehicle in there? We refer to that as unflooded access. Does the neighborhood, does the area have unflooded access? If it doesn't, then that becomes a priority to us so that the neighborhood could get in and get out. Roadway impacts are important. We also look at right-of-way. Do we have enough right-of-way? Do we need to buy property? Sometimes we need to purchase additional easements, or maybe sometimes we even need to buy some structures. So we look at that very carefully. We also look at permitting. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, we get our own permits. For these projects, I have to get a floodplain development permit. So we have to file for that. And sometimes those permits will require things like U.S. Army Corps of Engineers federal permits that we have to get. We also look at environmental impacts. What are we doing to the environment? Are we building something that's having an adverse impact on the environment? All of these factors score into our decision to score and rank them. Now, when you look at the scoring, you may question, well, why is that number this? Why is that number that? Keep in mind, what matters is how they compare to each other. They're relative, how they compare to each other. That's what's important within the drainage piece, because some of these include other factors that are not necessarily there. They include project continuation. If I started a project, I need to finish that. The worst thing I can do is build one project, wait 10 years, and then come back and tear up the street again. I can't do that. I have to have, so project continuation is also important. Project size is another piece. So there's a lot of factors that go into that decision for our scoring in our criteria. So we do have, and keep in mind, the scoring criteria is a way to help sort out the projects. So please don't get caught up on the number. Understand that they're relative to each other. So look at that when we're looking at some of those things. The other thing is that in addition to that, we have been asked to look at the guiding principles to see how our projects rank with those. Now, keep in mind, we have to, in these principles, we have to be a little bit general. So most of the times, you're not going to see many drainage projects that score 100%, because it includes factors that are very relevant to, say, maybe a major thoroughfare, a major street, or things like that. So you're not going to find drainage projects. You know, if you're doing a channel improvement, that's not necessarily going to help with transportation. So keep that in mind when you're looking at some of these factors. The leveraging funding, the opportunities, there's a lot of factors that go into it when you're starting to look at some of these projects. We can certainly spend some time to address any of those issues, but those are some of the factors that we look at when we're identifying and sorting, keep that in mind, sorting the projects that you have before you.
So up next is our citizens to be heard portion of the meeting, and your co-chairs asked that I share with you some of the guidelines that exist for this portion, just so you all can hear them out loud before we begin. The co-chairs will work through the list for everyone who's gathered here. So as you hear your name, we have some chairs set up here. They're going to call the next set of folks. So who's speaking will be here, and then if you'd line up here in the next names you hear. There's an allocated amount of time for citizens to be heard. So tonight on your agenda, you'll see that allocated each time we have it. As we work to the second meeting, we're going to prioritize people who have not been heard yet. So folks who are here tonight will be on the second tier of priority when it comes to the second meeting. So everyone understands that. So folks who have not been heard from at the second meeting will go first. We're going to call folks in the order in which they signed up. We ask that everyone who comes up to the podium during Citizens to be Heard is professional and respectful, and that they are mindful of their allotted time from the co-chairs so that everyone can have a chance to speak. Tonight, there are going to be 2 minutes for individuals and 5 minutes for groups, and the co-chairs have set that time, and Stephanie back there will keep time. She will wave her hand when there is 30 seconds left, so if you need a visual cue of when you have 30 seconds left, if you just look that way, that would be helpful. And that's what I have to say. Anything that I need to clarify there?
I think we're good, John. And then also, if you don't get a chance to make it, or if you wish to, there's a speak up option on the website that's open until December 9th to leave public comment. And I believe you have a visual aid also to let people know when the 30 seconds is up. First up on the list is Frank Fonseca, and then after that will be Charles Norway. So Frank, please state your name, and you got 2 minutes.
I've got handouts, so I was told to give them to somebody here so I can hand them out for me. So
Yes. John will come get them.
I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank you all for having me, for listening to me, giving me the time. And I know I've done the bounce before committees, and I know what it takes to be here several evenings a week. My name's Frank Fonseca. I'm from the Maverick Neighborhood Association. I'm the president of the association. I'm here to represent not only our members, but also the residents of our area. And our area is basically Babcock, Fredericksburg Road, and then Balcony Heights on the north. We sit right at the foot of the hill country. Technically, Balcony Heights, that's where it starts, and it goes out to the Edwards Plateau. And it's very hilly in our area, around Hillcrest, Inspiration Hills area. So, let me see here. How does this work? I see. Okay, so our area, let me start with this. I want to read that because I think it's pretty interesting what's going on now. This is an article from a website that I pulled out, and it says American cities used alleys to hide the more utilitarian, less attractive functions of urban life, including services and service access. And I'm going to skip to the present one now, and along with a new urbanism, we find ourselves once again embracing the alley as playing a critical role in the function of our cities and community development. Alleys are now a common feature in the design and redesign of our communities. People are finding out that the alleys can be reutilized in a different method, where people can use them for walking now. That's that's more the trend that neighborhood is going to. But our issues right now with the alleys is that since we're in a hill
sir.
and they're
Thank you,
low
sir.
maintained, the city has not
Your
maintained.
time's up.
Time's up.
Thank you. Yes.
Anyway, thank you. My
Thank you.
my handout is right there.
Yes, we all got the handout, and staff also has a copy, so they'll be able to help us out with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Charles Nori, and then after Charles will be John Early.
Thank you. I'm with the Share Hills Ridgeview Neighborhood Association. That's the area basically south of North Star Mall down to Bassey Road. And it's basically between Blanco Road and Jones Malsberger or Interstate 37. Basically, I'm speaking right now primarily for the Barber Drive project. This is Barber Drive project number 3. Barber Drive project 1 was completed by the county program where they bought homes and tore them down and created a park and an extensive drainage area that leads immediately into the Almost Dam Reservoir. Barber Drive Project 2 is under construction right now as part of the 2018 bond program. Here I have the disc of the engineering work for Project 3, Barber Street Project 3. And Barber Street Project 3 is going to be on Delwood Drive, north of Barber Drive, 100 block. So everything north of Oblate Drive on Delwood is Project 3. There are some other people here that will speak regarding some of the particular trauma experiences that they personally had. And I'm not going to cover that, but I want to stress, Mr. Early here lives immediately across Delwood Drive from where I live on the corner of Meadowwood and Delwood. He's on the corner of the 200 block of Meadowwood and Delwood. When Barber Drive project, when Delwood is flooding, we have had water as high as about 7 to 8 feet above Delwood Drive
Thank you, sir.
between my house
2 minutes,
and
sir.
his house. And when that happens, he has a very steep driveway and the water is all the way up to his
Okay.
garage door.
Thank you, sir. The 2 minutes has expired. It goes by pretty quick. Next on the agenda is John Early, who will be followed by the group from MP and will be followed by,
You can just call all of those.
okay. It will be followed by the group from MPNA, Dreg, Larissa, and Tom. Thank you.
Thank you all for having us tonight. And I just want to reiterate kind of what Charlie said. The Delwood Street is almost between San Pedro and McCullough, running north and south. It's probably half a mile from San Pedro to McCullough. And from North Star South down to Bassey Road is well over a mile. Delwood is like the Amazon River between San Pedro and McCullough. If the Barber Street project that Charlie talked about, 1 and 2, will alleviate some of that, but it will not alleviate all of it. Well, I thought that the primary problem was just along Delwood, adjacent to Delwood, but it starts at San Pedro and McCullough and all funnels down to Delwood. Now, there are drains under Delwood now, but the interest of those drains is not such that the water can get into it. They're little French drains. And within 15 or 20 minutes, when the flooding starts, those drains stop up. So something has to be done to get that water off the top of Delwood on down to Barber Street. Thank y'all.
Okay, next we have a group that gets 5 minutes. It's Drea Garza, Larissa O'Connors, and Tom Simmons. Following that group will be Frank Garcia.
Suzanne, allow me to talk about this Barbara Drive, and they're right. We have finished construction of phase 1, phase 2 under construction, and luckily phase 3 is one of our proposed drainage project, 8.6 million. When bond passed, we will start the design and construction shortly after that. Thank you.
How much? Wait a minute.
Hi, good evening. My name is Drea Garza, and I'm the president of the Monticello Park Neighborhood Association. Monticello Park is bordered by Fredericksburg Road, Wilson, Babcock, and Donaldson.
Hold on, can you pause real quick? Can you adjust the mic? Can somebody adjust your mic?
We can't hear you, ma'am.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Hi, good evening. My name is Drea Garza, and I'm with the Monticello Park Neighborhood Association. Monticello Park is bordered by Fredericksburg Road, Wilson, Babcock, and Donaldson. If you're familiar with Thomas Jefferson High School and Woodlawn Lake, then you're essentially in the heart of our neighborhood. We appreciate the opportunity to share with the committee our concerns regarding the need for drainage infrastructure within the area of Monticello Park and the greater community. Our community's drainage need is located in the Upper San Antonio River watershed, Campman tributary, to protect the homes and life safety of residents, beginning at the intersection of Lemming Drive and Babcock and ending at Campman Boulevard at West Woodlawn, essentially Woodlawn Lake Park. I did provide some materials for you that provide a little bit of context, but for the sake of time, I would like to focus only on the items that we would like to request consideration for. The first is Campman Boulevard, and this would be a project to remove all homes from the 100-year floodplain along Campman Boulevard. With Atlas 14 and the Sarah 100-year floodplain map updates underway, our floodplain may be expanding. We request the city to study, plan, and execute a flood control project to protect MPNA's residents. The last estimate that the city provided to MPNA in the 2016 bond response memo stated that the AECOM September 27th, 2012 study identified 2 solutions. The first was at 51 million and the other was at $40 million. But no additional updates have been provided since that time. The second project we would appreciate consideration of would be the Quinton Drive Alley project. In 2008, a new apartment complex was built at 2803 Fredericksburg Road, and a detention pond, which is required by code, was built on site. The development discharges their stormwater into the alley behind the homes on the 300 block of Quinton Drive, which then drains onto Campman Boulevard and into the 100-year floodplain. The city built a small drainage valley and added an inlet at the Quinton Alley and Campman Boulevard to address the flooding concerns, but unfortunately the flooding continues. Today, the stormwater runoff from 2803 Fredericksburg Road is flooding a home located at 347 Quinton when there is only 1.5 inches of rain. On October 15th, 2021, the water in the alley was 2 inches deep behind 347 Quinton Drive, and it flooded the residential property. The adjacent property at 343 Quinton also floods from this runoff. We request the city develop a project to address the stormwater runoff from this housing development to alleviate the flooding of homes during rain events. A solution may include purchasing the property at 353 Quinton Drive and creating a drainage easement connecting the alley to the street drainage inlet on the 300 block of Quinton. Lemming Drive Alley project is another potential project. It's behind the homes at 350 Lemming and 346 Lemming, a concrete drainage channel where the stormwater runoff from an apartment complex at 134 Babcock is channeled and discharged onto Lemming Drive and into the 100-year floodplain. This stormwater runoff floods the back of the homes. The apartments were built in the 1970s, and this area needs a drainage solution to prevent localized flooding in and adjacent to the 100-year floodplain. We would also like to request consideration of the deepening of the existing detention ponds with runoff onto Campman Boulevard or on-site, or to add on-site detention ponds. And some of these may include deepening the Laddie 2 detention pond, the deepening of the 2803 Fredericksburg Road detention pond to alleviate Quinton Alley stormwater runoff, and potentially to work with a property owner at 3481 Fredericksburg Road to add on-site detention to the property. And as you can see in the video behind me, here is some of the flooding that we experienced during a significant rain event. Some of the individuals standing here have homes located right in this area and took this video as it was happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will have Irene Ortiz, followed by Linda Taylor. Irene?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and speak before you. I am with the Sheriff Hills and Ridgeview Home Association, and I live at 105 Beechwood Lane and El Montan. There is a desperate need on El Montan for drainage that would also alleviate the flooding into Delwood. I'm here to ask and beg, really, for assistance. I have lived there since 1963, and it progressively has gotten worse. In 2015, as I was sitting in my den, suddenly I had a river going through my house. So you can see the desperation that I have. I'm 89 years old. I hope to live long enough to be able to see all of this drainage put in to alleviate all these problems that we have, flooding problems that we have in our area, in our community. I would very much like to see those drainage put in, hopefully within a short time. I thank you very much, and I hope that our voices are heard. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, ma'am. Next is Linda Taylor, which will be followed by Erica Noriega.
Thank you for having us here today. I spoke with several of my neighbors. Irene was one of them. I invited her here tonight because I helped her put sandbags in her backyard. She now has 4 sump pumps in her backyard to keep her house from flooding again. I spoke with Luis Fernandez. He lives at Delwood at the end of Beechwood. His house floods all the time. I wanted to make sure it was still flooding. Our house was flooding. We live at 114 Beechwood. The gentleman across the street, him and his wife, live at 115 Beechwood. They just spent $13,000 putting in new concrete to keep their house from flooding. So there's a lot of flooding coming from El Montan, which is 1 block west of Delwood. So we live on a hill in San Pedro, and all of that comes from all of those 2 large buildings there, the old CPS building and a strip mall. And all of that comes through and floods. And I've lived there 31 years. It's never been this bad. It wasn't like that when we first moved in, and it's been increasingly worse. And when they paved El Montan, we basically lost all of the curbs, and it all comes down like a river in our front and backyards. And so it's flooding our homes. So we need that drainage put back in El Montan. They paved over some of the grates that took some of the water away. So it's just a bad situation. And I went to my neighbors and asked them to come tonight because they were continue to have flooding. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Erica Noriega, followed by Rick Trevino.
Hi, yes, thank you. My name's Erica Noriega, and I also live on Beechwood. I live at 122 Beechwood Lane. Like you've heard, it floods really badly. I know El Montan, it comes down the alley, it floods our entire backyard. My garage floods often, and we have to take stuff out so that it doesn't get wet. And in 2015, when we had the big flood here in San Antonio, my husband almost lost his life on Delwood. There was a car that had come down with a grandmother and 2 young children who she was leaving early in the morning to go to North Star Mall to get some Jordans for her grandson. And it carried her all the way down to Delwood and had her lodged up onto a pole right there on Beechwood and Delwood. We heard their cries. My husband ran out, got the kids out because they were light, and my brother was there to grab them. The lady, he was trying to get her out, and she actually fell on top of my husband, which he had a rope in his hand. And the Barbara, all that drainage where they had to demo everything, because of that, it just converged everywhere. And by the grace of God, he's alive and that lady's alive. I don't know how my brother was able to hold my 215-pound husband and this lady who was larger than him and pull them out, but he did. So it is really bad there. There's people that have driven by and I tell them turn around because you can't tell how deep it is. So that's, basically what's going on, but I would hate to see a loss of life happen, and just to get this stuff fixed. So I know you got a lot of stuff to do in the city, but it's really important. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that input. Next is Rick Trevino, followed by Angela Sanchez.
Hello, folks. My name is Rick Trevino, and I'm really glad that I got to see this. We got Irene literally begging for help. You guys are about to make decisions on $165 million. It's a pretty penny. We're talking about life and death things here. So it's really important. I know the decisions you're about to make. And I like that we started off with transparency, because this is exactly what I want to talk about. So a lot of you guys don't know who I am. All you know is my name, Rick Trevino. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm in my third year of law school at St. Mary's. I'm going to get into criminal defense. I'm a certified principal teacher. Got my education at Trinity. I was funded by Eastside Promise Neighborhood. I ran for office a few times. They didn't work out for me, but hey, it's piloted me on a good path, I think. See, I went to the housing bond meeting and I heard a great conversation, but all I knew about the people was their name and the district they represented and nothing else. And I think it's totally reasonable for committees of 3 that are representing close to 150,000 people about to make decisions about $165 million that they get a chance to know a little bit more. So I'm making a very, I think, reasonable suggestion that someone here later on make a motion that you guys provide your employer and your job title. You give it to the co-chairs and it'd be made public. I asked the city manager's office for this. Apparently they don't have that. So that's why I'm here asking for this. And I think the city, the public, deserves to know more than your names. I know a couple of you guys here personally, and you guys are smart. And I think this small move, even though it's not everything, could really breed and foster trust into this process. Again, we're dealing with life and death issues. I really hope Irene gets to see that. But I also want Irene to know that the decisions were made by people that she could trust. And I think this little thing, I mean, hey, you guys are sitting down in a big spot. And if you want to speak on behalf of the community, I think it's totally reasonable to ask for just that. So I hope someone step up and take the lead and make a motion for your employer, job title. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Rick. At this time, I think we have staff ready to address a couple of the comments before we keep going.
Thank you, Chris. Most of the area was discussed around the Barbara Drive. That's going to be addressed our Phase 3 Barbara Drive. I want to make some correction on the budget for this project. It's going to be a little slightly over $14 million. $5.4 million is going to come from the bond. $8.6 million will come from Stormwater Regional Fund. Together, project is going to be a slightly over $14 million, $14.03 million project. Shortly after bond passes and Phase 2 is finished, we will start design and construction Phase 3. Yeah, Daleview is covered what Barbara Drive Phase 3 also. It covers very big area. That's the reason we have $14 million budget for this project.
So Razi, just to clarify, you're saying that the project Barbara Drive project, that Phase 3 that we have here, will address some of the flooding here that they're talking about on Delwood?
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
Where the water's coming down to Delwood. So what we're talking about here, Ms. Ortiz, myself, my daughter, that's coming down from Comontan, 1 block west.
It's the staff, excuse me, staff can address you guys individually. We have other people signed up to speak. Thank you.
Why not we discuss this one exactly where you are talking about? We know the project limit and what area is going to cover.
Thank you.
I think that when we get to the deliberations of the committee, I think that's where you can ask your questions. So that way we can get all the citizens' comments finished. And then during our time, you can ask questions about the presentation that you saw from Razi, as well as the citizens to be heard to get more clarification if you like. The next speaker is Gary Hudman. So that you don't need to speak? Okay, and then Charles O'Connors? Okay, so you signed up, let me see, were they 20? Okay. Same with Jose Sanchez? Same, okay. All right, the next we have a group from, I think it's Monte Vista Terrace, is that correct? It's Lori, Abney, Sylvia White, Mary Johnson, Angie, something Peters, I think it's Chows Peters, and then James White. This all is District 1. And they have 5 minutes for the group. And what we'll do, based on the request, and we should have been doing this earlier, we're learning here, is when we call the name, we'll give you the district. And so we can go back through this list if you're interested in the districts. of the other speakers that were earlier in the evening, and we can go through those districts.
Okay, hello, my name is Lori Abney. I am representing the Monte Vista Terrace Association in relation to the Annie Area Drainage Project number 2773. Our neighborhood is located in the heart of San Antonio in the SAISD District 1. During a rainfall, the water flows downhill from McCullough and Hildebrand onto our properties. The underground drainage project will keep the water off of our properties, protecting our land from erosion, foundational damage, and flooding. Equity. Historically, this area was a community of color, primarily to Black families, and home to a lower income population. It was known as the Kenwood area. Yes, these homes did flood. We have proof that the city has known about this flooding prone area since 1956, yet has neglected it of any flooding or drainage mitigation. We are sitting in a web of risk that has been allowed to be spun out over decades. Public health. It will provide residents and motorists with safe road conditions. Within minutes of a moderate rainfall, the sidewalks on Holland become invisible. It will eliminate pools of ponding, which cause many mosquitoes, eliminate hazardous chemicals. We have witnessed algae on our properties near Holland, and we have video of it, of algae on Annie property and seeping onto the street. Eliminate solid objects. I get large shards of glass, rusty nails, trash, etc. This project will promote a sustainable green infrastructure. It will allow residents to plant shrubs, trees, and grass on their properties without it getting washed away. Resiliency. It will protect our land from current and future erosion. Every time it rains, it takes our soil with it, leaving our properties and foundations exposed. It will protect our homes from flooding. This is my home right there, the backyard of the other home. And it will allow for new developments to be constructed without adverse effects to current residents. There are currently 3 new developments in the planning building stage, 1 on Holland, 2 on Annie. Connectivity. This connects to 2 of those projects as they have been aware that their area, their property sits on a flooding plain and gets flooded, so they are waiting flood and drainage mitigation. That's 218 and 222 Annie. This project is also related to the Shook Avenue project number 1068. Together, they will align the city with this, it will align the area with the city's plan of creating a disaster-resistant community. In conclusion, the neighborhood's future for survival hinges on the implementation of this underground drainage project. Its already vulnerable, non-existent drainage cannot sustain the new developments that are being planned and soon to be constructed. This area did not receive justice 65 years ago. It cannot wait another 5 years. We know you've been given a summary sheet from Anissa Shell District 1. We have packets for you if you haven't. We have been working for months with Robert Reyna of Stormwater Engineering, and he provided this sheet with the details of construction and cost. We have many of the residents here today whose homes are directly impacted. These are just some of the pictures. We have videos for you and other pictures. Thank you.
Thank you. Next sign up to speak is Sylvia Alanis, District 2.
Good evening. My name is Sylvia Alanis, Eastgate Neighborhood Association President. I'm here because I want to meet all of you and for you to meet me, that we're real people in our neighborhood. Eastgate is being considered or recommendation to fix our drainage. We do have a drainage that was done in 2012, 2017, but the drainage is up here, the new one, and our neighborhood is down here. When it rains, I would say that the water's up to the knee in order for it to go to the new drainage. But the whole neighborhood has to flood before the water goes into the new drainage. It needs to be connected. There was a lot of money spent there, but in our neighborhood, we're getting flooded. And it really needs to be fixed. We are tired of going to church in muddy streets. We're getting tired of walking our neighborhood, going to church or going to schools. Our neighborhood was annexed in 1965, and we've been dealing with flooding for a long time. We have Martindale Air Force Base that is on the east side of our neighborhood, and everything comes, depending how the earth is down, it comes to our neighborhood, and where does it go? Nowhere. So I see residents digging trenches to go to the street, but it's not going nowhere. So I really count on your vote in case it goes to the voters, all of your voters, and I depend on your vote so you can help us out on a neighborhood that is in need for a drainage. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes people who are signed up to speak. Question for staff. We've heard some more people speak. Was any of that addressed by the current drainage projects that we have? No. Oh,
Let me just quickly tell them who these districts were, and then we'll, so Frank Fonseca, who was talking from Maverick, is District 7. Charles Nori, who was talking about the Barber Drive project, is District 1. John Early, who also spoke about that Delwood area, District 1. All of the folks from the Monticello Park area, that's District 7. Irene Ortiz, who spoke about the El Montaigne Street, that is District 1. Same with Linda Taylor, who talked about Delwood, that area. She is also District 1. Erica Noriega, who spoke about Beechwood, Delwood, is also District 1. Rick Trevino, who asked about the names and where folks work and their employers, is in District 7. Everyone that was from Monte Vista Terrace, that's District 1. So I think that's everyone. Thank y'all. Sorry, Chris.
thank you. I believe staff wants to give us an update on all these that we've heard about. It sounds like some of these things are already in bond projects.
Yeah, I have a good news to report on a Peggy Drive area drainage improvement, or Eastgate subdivision, is budgeted for 20 million. Not just we are going to take care of all of the drainage issue in this subdivision, we are going to rebuild the roadway, sidewalk, curb, and driveways.
I have a question. Was that the Delwood area, the people that were here saying that their homes, backyards, and front yards flooded? Is that being taken care of?
Are you going to speak about the Delwood project?
Yeah, I think Barbara Drive, which is include Delwood Drive, Shadywood Lane, Uplake Drive, and Barbara Drive, which is slightly over $40 million. This is just few of the major roadway I'm mentioning. When we do the drainage project, we really look for the entire area to make sure we are really taking care of all of the existing drainage issues.
So that includes the one block that she was talking about that she didn't think was included.
Beechwood Lane. That comes down into the Delwood, Beechwood area. I think that's what she was referring to.
I think Neffy and Steph is talking with them outside to make sure we understand their concern.
Okay. Thank you.
So you'll clarify that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
We'll
thank you.
clarify whether or not that area is covered with what you anticipate the scope for that project. Okay.
Correct.
May I make a comment, Rosie? We had met with Sylvia this past Saturday, and Neffy was there, and it looked like there was some properties to actually include some green infrastructure as a part of this, and I would like that to be considered for this project also, if possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
A quick follow-up question on that.
Just a reminder, if the committee members, please state your name so that it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want me to say it now? Debbie Reed with District 2.
And I was Minnie Abrego Sanchez, District 10.
Christopher Fullerton, District 8. A quick question on that last project, since it seems to have overlap with streets and bridges. Where do you divide the loaf there to decide how much of that comes under this committee's purview versus the neighboring committee's purview? And what happens if part of it passes but not the other? Is it a must-pass combination project?
I think the idea is we have a number of the projects, we have funding from both proposition, streets and drainage. For example, on Council District 4 and 6, Marbach Block is one of them, Marbach Road. And we really need funding on both because we don't want to do a drainage without street work. We don't want to do street work without drainage work. I think we need the money. Maybe that's a good reason for those projects we passed because we need to start the design of those projects.
But Rozzy, it looks like the Peggy Drive, if our list is correct, it's 20 million you mentioned, and it looks like it's all on drainage. Is that correct?
Correct. That's a big
That
part.
does not, that's not split with streets.
That's not one. Very few project, handful of project is split on both, getting funding from both, but Peggy Drive is not one of them.
So along those lines.
Eric Waters, I'm sorry.
Sorry, just a quick question. Is it possible when we get to meeting 4 to understand what the status is of the other joint projects with the Streets Committee? So that if, for instance, they've pushed something off of their list, why should we be considering it, right?
So the comment being, if one of the ones that is joint funded for some reason falls off the list or is not prioritized or is not selected by the other committee, we need to be informed of that here.
We will inform you, but I don't think we are going to know until really after 4th meeting because they are like your committee. First one was briefing, second and third one is going to be hearing from the community. And of course, 4th one will be vote. But whenever we learn, we will inform you.
Thank you.
Eric Waters from District 1. Just a real quick refresher on the Peggy Drive. She mentioned Martindale Air Force Base. Can the city manager's office just give us a refresher on where the dividing line is if a federal property is causing flood damage or draining issues into city of San Antonio, where that dividing line is and what the federal funding requirement is versus a bond requirement? Thank you.
Neffy Garza, Public Works. Thank you so much for that question. I will tell you that as we get more into design, we'll be able to better understand exactly the drainage pattern. We have seen the drainage from that Air Force Base is coming into the neighborhood. What we haven't done is we haven't necessarily sized up the exact channel, so we can't necessarily go and get funding from them. But that will be one of the things we will be addressing to try and identify a way to take that water and maybe divert it, or that'll be a part of what we do with the design when we get there.
Thank you very much. And just a real quick follow-up, if I might, just to explain for me. And for instance, on the Monte Vista Terrace, is there a possibility that something similar there is going on with the city of Olmos Park? And is that something that factors in, or is that different than the federal? And I'm just putting these two questions back to back for similarities.
I'd have to kind of look at that one a little bit closer. Usually when we work with another community, another city, I will tell you many times they don't have a lot of funding to do some of the work, but we do have to work closely with them.
Thank you.
Patrice Melanson, District 10. Neffy, Martin Air Force Base, I've never heard of. I mean, maybe that's a legacy, but is that still federal property?
I believe it is. I believe it is.
But it's not being actively used as as a military installation
There
that I'm
are,
aware of.
I believe they are planes that are still flying in there. So
Oh, it's a reserve unit, or
Oh, it's a
maybe it's a guard unit, because I've never heard of it. I was in the reserves and I've never heard of Martin Air Force Base.
it's Martindale. I'm sorry, it's Martindale.
I've never heard of that either. It's probably a guard base. Okay. So my question is, the Annie area drainage project and the Shook Avenue project that were mentioned in District 1, are those covered by one of the funded projects currently on the list, or are those not funded?
Any Drive and Shook are not. They are not. The one we're looking at, I think we were talking about was Barber Drive.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Mario Aguilar, District 8. Just a question. I know some of the projects are being funded by this bond, and then there's some that are getting regional funding, some type of regional funding. You know, you're looking at the Peggy Drive of 20 million. Is there any way we can get additional dollars to co-op some of that?
During this bond, even our bond is pretty large, 1.2 billion. We were also looking to see how can we increase that bond. When whenever developer is done in San Antonio, either they have to create on-site detention, and if there is no downstream impact, they could pay fee in lieu. And that's the money we generate to spend on regional drainage project. This time, we are taking advantage of that to adding that money to our $1.2 billion, which is going to be 38 million addition for the drainage. Certain project, when they meet this requirement, is receiving funding from that. Unfortunately, Peggy Drive is not one of them. That's the reason we are just funding from the bond.
Thank you. Bianca, you have a question?
Yes, Bianca Maldonado, District 7. I guess this is really for Neffy. Monticello Park Neighborhood Association came up here and gave a presentation. They also presented at the last bond committee 5 years ago. Can you update all the estimates that you've previously provided on District 7 projects for the last bond input, in addition to the ones you've received today? I'm very familiar with the Monticello Park request. For those of you who don't know, there's a significant amount of drainage detention that has already been funded and installed, and yet you still see the flooding that you saw in that video today. And that's life safety. You cannot have a fire truck cross Campman Boulevard. You can't have a fire truck cross Babcock in that particular instance. And they've identified 2 situations where there are apartments that are, even an apartment in a recent construction, which happens to be an affordable housing development for seniors, whose runoff is flooding homes. So we do a lot for affordable housing in this community, but we should ensure that they don't flood our community. And the city stepped up immediately when there was a flooding issue when it happened, but it never addressed the full depth of the problem. And this is literally 500 feet off the floodplain where the situation is occurring. And so I think that they've identified several solutions that they did also 5 years ago, and yet there doesn't seem to be a plan. And so I think when you see a need like this, the last estimates are 40 to 50 million, and those estimates are 11 years old. They're probably significantly higher than that. When you live in a community and people are afraid to go to sleep at night when it's raining really hard because that water may come in your house while you're sleeping, or your vehicle may wash away, that's life safety. And I think back that everything that we can do to help move the needle on drainage with over a $3 billion need, at the end of the day, to me, drainage rises above a trailway. Drainage rises to the top, in my opinion, and we are not moving the needle on a $1.2 billion bond. We are not giving more money to drainage in this bond compared to the last bond, and we should. Hear, hear. And so I want to tell you, as you know, when you go to presentations and people present information to you, you all got this PowerPoint. The reason I'm pointing it out to you is that all the homeowners who had a green dot on their home were told, when we finish Lattie 3, we will get you out of the floodplain. You will be removed from the 100-year floodplain. Guess what? That didn't happen. So they're all sitting in the floodplain, going, what's next? What's the next plan, Neffy? What's the next plan? We cannot move the needle. We have to move the needle. We have to do something. And they've given a lot of integral steps. I know they gave you credit in the letter for working with them on putting some inlets to address some localized flooding, because when you get 3 inches of rain or an inch and a half, the water shouldn't go over your curb, just like you said. It shouldn't start flooding your property. But this is an older area of the community. We have significant topography issues in here. And so we're not going to be able to fund something for this community, I think, on a big project in this bond cycle. But there is something you can do to move the needle with some of the other requests. And so I look forward to your response. Neffy, I know I'm putting you on the spot here. They did provide a lot of historical information. They are documenting. They risked their lives to take a video because we all know everybody wants to see how bad the water is, right? And I think they did that, you know, and in that video, that's not even a 100-year flood event. So I just wanted to say and thank the neighborhood for coming out. We also have Maverick who came out for alleys. And there's been a lot that's been done in the general fund to address closed alleys to assist with drainage. And I'll look forward to your response for their alleys to see if they're identified and if that could be moved forward. And is that even an eligible project for bond consideration? I know my history with working on bonds, typically alleys have not been an eligible project for bond funding, but anything that we can do. I know that many of these people took the time to come down here and share their personal stories with us. And we may not be able to address it today, but can we put it in queue and follow up? Because they took time to give us their input. Let's use it. Let's put them on the list for the next bond already. I think that's a good foundation to ensure that we value what they're telling us and we're going to act on it. I think that's the least that we owe each and every person who took time to come down here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. If I could address the question, we are going to update those costs. So for the area along Campman, you saw that incredible video. We've seen very similar videos. We've personally been out there to see some of that challenge. As you know, Ms. Maldonado, we have been working closely with Bexar County. Bexar County, you should know, Bexar County does collect a street and flood tax. If you look at your property bill, Bexar County does collect that. We work very closely with them. They're great partners with us. They've helped us in many projects. The last communication I had with them is that they're going to be updating that study to identify a project within Campman area, the area that floods, to identify what is the appropriate size project. And then our job with them would be to help determine what phase we can do, how to take the bites out of this large project. And that right now, that's part of the plan that we're doing. We need to take care of sealing first. That makes a lot of sense to do that. Then we got to come back because sealing is a downstream control. And then we're able to take care of Campman and work our way up to Campman and take care of some of those areas. So we do have a plan. And during our response, we can be a little more in detail.
Thank you. And Neffy, real quick, Neffy, as people bring up projects that may not be on the list, what is staff doing with that information, just so everyone understands what the process is?
So I will tell you that many of the locations that have been brought up or that you have been brought up, we have that information in our database. We are aware of some of those challenges. What happens is we're documenting, and as the questions come up, we will provide responses to that. So know that we will identify them and provide you a response on what is planned for that area. Sometimes it's something that can be done with the bond. Sometimes it's something that we can do with our yearly budget, or we can seek funding with the county or even with the state to get funding. So there's multiple ways of doing this.
As a
hold
follow-up,
on.
Bianca Maldonado, District 7.
Let me just say, so if there's a project that was brought up by one of the neighborhood associations that's not on our list, if we do have a quad sheet on that, we will share that with this committee in our response that we put out in 48 hours so that you'll have that project.
That'd be great. Bianca Maldonado, District 7, a follow-up, Mr. Garza. Sealy Channel Phase 4 is being funded. As you know, Sealy Channel and the Campman drainage converge onto Woodlawn Lake. Can you provide a response to me indicating that the improvements that are being done in the Sealy Channel Phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 will not have an adverse impact in expanding the drainage or the floodplain at the intersection of Campman and West Woodlawn and West Woodlawn and Lake. We've had discussion about this. There's a timing issue on how all that water converges down at that intersection. So I know you've told me you've got to do your Sealy channel, but I'm still a little concerned with Atlas 14 and all the map updates that Sarah is doing. So if you could respond in writing and let me know that that is being addressed, it will not, to your point, not have an adverse impact downstream as we make improvements on the northwest side to the water that's coming down from Campman. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, so any other questions right now on the citizens to be heard, any of the projects? We'll get some responses from staff as to any of the issues that were raised here. If some of the projects that are on the list address some of those issues, the clarification that Bianca asked also on the ceiling channel, just so that we understand a little bit about being responsive to the input that we received.
And Suzanne, one quick point. There was a question raised, well, what happens if the street committee, drops off a street project, that there's a related drainage project? Fortunately for this group, the street committee will have their fourth meeting on December 13th. This group will have their last meeting on December 15th. So we will be armed with that information. We can share it with you at that fourth meeting.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Ms. Scott, Eric Waters, District 1. Piggybacking on Ms. Maldonado from District 7, on the alleys, I don't feel like that question got addressed. That, of course, is a massive problem inside of 410, no matter where you go. Does that fall into drainage? Is there a bigger city project that's being done just to address growth in the alleys in general? Or is that something that needs to get funded through the bond? Thank you.
Yeah, a little update on the alleys. We have over 4,000 alley in city of San Antonio. Majority of them is located within Loop 410. Many years ago, they developed. Some of them, we really don't know who's the owner of those alley. This year, through budget process, we got some funding. We are hiring consulting to assist these alley to identify who's really the owner of these alley, and maybe we can have them to maintain. And if we are the owner, we probably have to maintain. From over 4,000 alley, 891 or so service alley. This is the one as a garbage pickup, picks up the garbage and other. And we have program, we keep upgrading those so often. In last few years, also in few council district, we have done some repair on the non-service alley, council district 1, 5, and 7. Of course, never is enough. There is a need always more than that. But for last few years, we have done few alley, non-service alley upgrade.
Thank you.
Andy Green in District 6, can I ask a question? Can you hear me okay? So one of the projects that's been recommended, Lower French Creek improvements, which affects both District 6 and 7, 13 million, 6.5 coming from the bond and 6.5 coming from the Stormwater Regional. Of that 6.5 million coming from the Stormwater Regional, has that already been funded and is it allocated to this project?
After bond passes, money will be coming from Stormwater Regional, correct?
So you have a budget to work from for the 2022 fiscal year, and the funds are available in there and it will be allocated.
Of course, in the very beginning, we don't really need all of the funding.
Understand.
In the beginning, we do design, which is cost the 10-15%. But yeah, we will have funding available shortly after bond passes.
All right, thank you.
And I'm sorry, can I do one more follow-up since Mr. Fonseca came in and spoke tonight? Does the group in the Maverick Neighborhood Association, do we know who those alleys belong to in particular?
Not until we have done the alley assessment, which will be done probably later on next year.
Okay, thank you.
Bianca, District 7, I just wanted to follow up on your request. You were asking about Maverick. The District 7 office, the City Council office, has made a concerted effort to address drainage through many of those closed alleys. So anybody who's reported it to 311, if it's identified by the city evaluates it, and the councilwoman funded many of those alleys. There was a huge backlog. So if these are new alleys and they haven't been evaluated, they would have never been eligible for that funding in the past. And it was a one-time budget situation. So I know that there are resources available for District 7 alleys to pursue once they're evaluated and meet that criteria, if that is of assistance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding citizens to be heard? If not, we can go into,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
go
sir.
ahead.
Gabriel Gonzalez, District 4. I just want to clarify that Martindale is not an Air Force base. It belongs to the Army. And it belongs to the Texas National Guard. So it doesn't belong to DOD, Department of Defense. So you to get more information on that, you contact the state for that.
Thank you for that clarification, too.
Patrice Melanson, District 10. I don't know if this is the right time to bring this up, but looking at some of the historical plus-ups from 2017 to the 2022 bond, we noticed that there, and I want to say up front, I'm a huge supporter of parks. I'm a huge art lover, but I think that we have put too much money into things that are much more nice to haves than really needs to have. I noticed that there was 87 million that's been added for parks. The art fee, I'm not sure if that's the right term, went from 1% to 1.5%. Again, I love art. I am a huge park person. I love Salado Greenbelt. I ride on it. I walk on it. But I feel like our priorities have gotten a little skewed. Thank you.
Thank you. It sounds like Rod has a response.
Well, I was just going to say, it's not really in the committee's purview to say, take more money out of this fund and put it in this fund. But as I suggested in your first meeting, if there are projects that are not recommended for funded, I recommend that you come up with a list, beyond what we're recommending of projects that, we don't have the funds to do.
Thank you.
And prioritize those, send it to council, say, council, if you decide to make the drainage bucket bigger, let's add these projects. So that could be part of your recommendation that you make to council.
Exactly.
Minnie Abrego Sanchez, District 10. Thank you for that, for letting us know, since I've never served on a bond committee before. But so then we suggest that projects be added, and then it will be council people's prerogative or choice to then take money. But will they know that, I know ours will, because we'll let him know. But will they know that we have asked that this, perhaps if everyone is in agreement, that we've asked that some of this money from parks that we love and some of the cultural things be transferred over to drainage and flood?
I wouldn't necessarily say we recommend you transfer money, but I would recommend that you say,
move.
Should
Move
you
money.
make the drainage bucket bigger, we recommend that you fund these projects in this priority. That's what I recommend that you send
Okay.
to council.
And
Whatever works.
We
Thank you.
talked about that a little bit next time, and I think that kind of is appropriate as we move into this next agenda item, is we were asked to not only look at what's on the list, but then if we want to add projects and have those considered, then that's our prerogative to put that list together and say, these are the ones that we feel are priority for funding if more funding is added.
Sorry, Patrice Melanson, District 10, one more question. So what is the right venue to have that discussion about moving money out of other pots into drainage or
That's-
streets?
That's
Is
the,
that's not our purview?
That's not our purview.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I know the lady down here has had her hand up for a while.
Maria Tijerina, District 5. I just had a question, clarification, being that all these different projects are coming to our attention. With recently passed infrastructure funding from the government be funds that could be used for some of these projects?
Yes,
I think that when that came up to the city council during that conversation, they indicated there potentially could be some funding coming to the San Antonio, but I don't know if that's known yet. If that's, I think that's what they said. That they don't, I mean, they passed it and now they got to divvy it up and figure out what goes where and how all of that happens. But maybe Eric can elaborate on that.
Yeah, we don't know. That money, which was approved, will go to the agencies. In fact, we had a big meeting at downtown this afternoon. And we won't know for some time because the agency requirements, we will start internally looking at, I guess what I would call shovel-ready projects, whether they're public works, drainage, transportation, airport related, so that we're prepared. But we're not sure about the timing of that and how that folds in. We will obviously be watching that, because if that allows us or the council an opportunity to shift and take advantage, then we'll certainly do that.
Looks like Bianca, you have a question.
Bianca, District 7, I have a follow-up question about what funding can be utilized for. It's my understanding the ARPA funds can be used for drainage. And that's federal funding right now. The city's doing public input. There's over $260 million that you can request drainage projects for. They're asking for your input and they're advertising, asking you to please come to their meeting. So that would be another great place to ask for drainage funding.
Yeah, and absolutely, there's a town hall tonight going on right now. So those are going on for the rest of the month and are an option. And just since Bianca brought that up, that's on a similar timeline as this bond process. We'll be giving the council an update in December on what we're hearing from the public about how COVID has impacted you, and then looking to have the council approve that multi-year plan in January. The week before, they're hearing the 5 committee recommendations. And one other thing, I walked up here because one thing this group could consider, it's one of the things that the Parks Committee talked about last night. You do have a 1.5% set aside for art, public art here. And so if the group wants to debate and reduce that to 1% or whatever, then that money is allocated in your bucket. It's unlike the comment or the conversation regarding parks or other buckets, but that is something that this committee could look at as well and talk about.
Thank you, Eric, for letting us know that it sounds like we can make a recommendation on the art percentage. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Maria Tijerina, District 5. I just had a follow-up questions on this project request forms. Do those have to be turned in today or no?
No, and I think, Rod, it would be helpful for clarification from just on process. If this committee, after hearing the citizens to be heard here today, and we're going to get the responses, and then the citizens to be heard that we hear next week, since those projects have been brought up from citizens, and if this group decides to deliberate and figure out where they would fall in the priority, can we consider those submitted, or does someone on this committee need to fill out one of those forms for one of the projects that were brought up from a citizen, or can we just assume those are considered submitted?
Right. We have some quad sheets on some of those, so
Okay.
we will share that with this group in our response to you.
Okay. So we don't have to, if you're wanting to submit one of the projects that comes up through the citizens be heard process, you don't have to fill out a form for that. This would be a project that has not been, that you yourself or your group want to bring up that maybe didn't come through the citizens to be heard process.
Right. And when are this due? Now?
As soon as you have the information, it's helpful for you to go ahead and submit it, because it allows for the staff to do whatever analysis would be necessary for consideration when we get to our deliberations.
If you provide us that one today, for next meeting, we scope that project, do cost estimate, and do presentation for you.
District 10, Paul Royal Priest. As we talk about adding new projects as well as a continuation of project, and now 21 district projects on the bond, we have 8 continuation of project. Do we know when and how much money do we need to have those continuation project to be closed? in District 10, we have one project for continuation, phase 1. And what is the time frame when it's going to be closed, and what amount of money we need, and what is the stage? How many phases do we need to have this project be completed? Thank you.
I think you're referring to Eisenhower, the project in your district. So this will finish one of the phases. There are other phases, and ultimately it goes down to Eisenhower. So there's a plan to address multiple items, but we need to do this phase first before we can address the other ones. I'm not sure if I got the correct response to that, but there are multiple phases.
Do we know how many phases and when this phase 1A will be finished, and why it's $11 million, not $9 million, not $20 million?
So in this particular case, we have determined the limits. Obviously, when it's going to be finished, we're going to put it in the bond. But then there will be consequent phases to it that eventually go down to Eisenhower and address that. Those phasings, those have not been fully defined, as we need to do the design first. But we can provide you a written response on that for you, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Plaza
Let me
project
address about why 11 million, not 9 or not 12. We look for where it makes sense to start and stop the project. After we determine the limit of the project, then we do the cost estimate. That's the reason we have 11 million. Could we do 9 million? Probably, but that's not really good place to stop the project, middle of the block or in front of somebody's house. I think that's the reason we have 11 million.
Thank you.
And we finish all of this project under 5 years. For 2017 bond, we are looking for May of next year, 97% of the project either substantially complete or under construction.
Thank you. I think somebody over here. Yes.
Yes, Debbie Reed, District 2. Just, you gave us some additional information that we asked for. Our attachment C is additional projects, and then D, I think, is unfunded projects. Can you kind of explain the differences, and are any of these past quad sheets?
We have, Nef is telling me we have quad sheet on all of them. Quad sheet really means we have a area map, the scope of the project, and project cost. That's really what we call quad sheet.
So Debbie, in addition to that continuation with, we have a list. Those are projects that we currently do not have funding for, that are on our list to be addressed, and that's the list that you received, I believe.
So do I understand that attachment C, additional projects would be the priorities and unfunded projects would be a priority less than that?
It is additional projects that are in consideration within that district. Yes,
Got it.
Yes, ma'am.
Just one more question. Maria Tijerina, District 5. I just wanted to inquire before I put this project request form. Is the Conception Creek projects already identified to your knowledge?
Yes, we have identified that project. We work with the councilwoman for your district. She desired for us to do different project at this time.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mario Aguilar, District 8. Just wanted to see, we hear a lot about the floodplain maps, and it seems like they're being updated. Do we have a timeline as to when they're going to be completed?
Neffy can talk to that. It's sort of, they're coming in over phases.
So thank you for that question. Yeah, the FEMA flood maps that we that we have will be updated. They're in the process right now. Our partner in the San Antonio River Authority was tasked with working with FEMA to do that update, to incorporate Atlas 14, to incorporate all the new development, to incorporate all the projects that have been built. That process is ongoing. In the springtime, we should start seeing maps that there's going to be public meetings, multiple public meetings throughout the city to identify it. There will be a website where you can see the maps. You can probably type in your address and all of that. The San Antonio River Authority is in that process of doing that. They're finalizing. My staff has been in reviewing all of that. All of these projects incorporate the data that is found in those new maps and models. So we are using the best available data to design these projects. But the preliminary schedule right now is you will start seeing things in the spring, and then FEMA has a deliberately long process so that you can either get flood insurance or start identifying things, and that'll be their process. But you'll start seeing things in the spring.
Thank you, Neffy. It's 7:30, 7:34, and I just wanted to make sure if the information that was provided on the rankings, that this was a big question that came up last time we met, this long spreadsheet here of each of the projects, includes some of the flood benefit, whether it's considered for green infrastructure, some additional notes relative to 311 calls, other things like that, along with the scoring. We're trying to see if this it kind of puts it all in one place. That was one of the things that I think y'all were wanting to see. Is this responsive to your requirements or requests for information on these projects in this format? And do you have any questions about this information at this time? I know we have just a few more minutes left today, but I wanted to be sure that we got back to that from last time and the criteria that are along with it. If there's any questions or comments about that y'all would like for us to address.
And while you guys are looking at that, I think, gentlemen, yes, you had a question?
This is a follow-up from District 5 question on Conception Creek project. How many homes are impacted on the floodplain on the Conception Creek project?
I think the homes was affected in 1,000, but one of the challenge with that project, we had to buy 100 homes to create detention on the upstream to eliminate flooding or reduce the flooding downstream. And this time, property value being so high and people has difficulty to buying house to relocate, Councilwoman wasn't really too favoring for us to proceed with this project because we had to buy 100 houses. And also we were also comfortable. We can really buy 100 houses, relocate them, demo the houses, and build the detention there within 5 years.
Is there a master plan already for that for a long-term fix?
We have the need, we know the need, but we have done preliminary engineering, correct. We have done it, but probably has to be some other funding sources.
So I was wondering, can bond funds be used to create a good master plan to correct the problem there? Because you're saying there's over 200 houses that are impacted, 200 families or more?
We had to buy a little over 100 houses, but the other properties in thousands affected by flooding.
And in all those properties, how many are vacant lots?
We don't have the number on those.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe if we get bonds funds to pay for a master plan to identify what can be bought that are vacant lots already to increase the drainage basin, and not construction, but do a good master plan.
Okay.
Chairman Scott, go ahead.
AB Salinas, District 1. I have a question and a request. The first was the question on Peggy Drive is tagged at $20 million. And I was curious about how many properties are impacted or removed from flooding, or kind of what kind of went into the scoring decisions for the project benefits on that one.
So Peggy Drive or Eastgate subdivision, it is a large project. The subdivision itself, and I think when we go out in December 4th to our field trip, I hope that it would be very evident. When we go out there, you'll realize that subdivision has no infrastructure. There's no infrastructure there. Many of these homes receive so much water. The way it was built, it is in a very flat area. There's no curbs, there's no driveways. There is a strip of asphalt for a street. And all of the homes are impacted by the floodplain. The FEMA floodplain is a little bit further downstream. It doesn't go into the neighborhood itself. And there is a channel, there's a concrete channel that was built so that emergency vehicles could get in. Unfortunately, what happens is emergency vehicles cross the channel, but when they get to Peggy Drive itself, there's about 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet of water that literally ponds in the area until it dries out. The day I was out there, there was a lot of mosquitoes simply because the ponding water out there. And so it is an issue that will alleviate a lot of homes of that. I don't know that I necessarily have an exact number. As you very well know, probably the best solution would be a 2-dimensional model in there just to identify that.
Thank you, Nefi. And then the second thing is, as we listen to citizens to be heard in the projects for consideration, and we talk about the drainage bucket and, what are some projects that we prioritize if there's funding available, is it possible to get a similar scoring of projects for the ones that we're hearing so that if there is availability to do that, that we're objective and fair about it?
Our plan is to any of the new project, we will bring you the scope of the project, cost of the project, and score of the project. Then you can make a decision based on our scoring.
Thank you.
Can I real quick piggyback on what he was talking about? It was attachment D or exhibit D that you handed out for the unfunded projects. Was that going to include, and maybe I missed it, was that going to include the same scoring that the funded projects had?
Nefi, this is attachment D that went out in the memo dated, I guess, November 2nd.
I'm just missing that attachment. Apparently it's there. Okay.
Attachment D? Okay. They're not, I don't see a ranking.
There's another document, not attachment D, that has them.
Yeah, there's nothing attached to that attachment D, just the dollars. It shows the 2017 bonds and the
Yes.
ultimate bond dollar, but no scoring.
We have scored all of the drainage project. If we haven't provided to you, we can provide you in 48 hours.
I think it's one, was it in the binder? I think it's in the binder.
I think there's a score.
Yeah.
In the big binder, the virtual binder that they did send out, I think they may have been, scoring sheet.
I believe the sheet that you're referring to are the 2017 considered projects. While we have those were not subject to the scoring that we did for this round. Some of those may have been scored, but I believe the majority of those were not.
Okay.
So are we going to get the scores for those if they're not scored?
I appreciate my staff. I have such good staff. They did correct me and they said they did provide scores for the projects that were provided to you or were limited to how many per council district, but the 2017, they're telling me that we do have scores and we can make those available.
Thank you. I see a mic on over here.
And we can clarify further within the time period, 48 hours.
Julie Magadance, District 9. I was wondering if we're still going to get any answers to questions that we may have emailed to staff. Were those going to be read? I did, because I emailed a question and I don't want to jump the gun and ask the question if they're going to still do that. So
Yes, we should be receiving the answers to staff. I think Yeah, you can ask right
Okay,
now.
I'll just ask. On attachment F, there was part of, one of the keys at the bottom describes a mandatory detention area, and there are several areas on the map that are highlighted in orange. And I was just wondering if someone can explain what the mandatory detention area means and how it might impact the projects that are taking place in those orange areas.
The mandatory detention areas are areas, so at the last meeting that we had, I mentioned how San Antonio is built on the side of a hill and how it is about conveyance. It's about moving water. But I also mentioned to you that we have areas, especially old historic areas, that were not built to today's standards. We know of areas that have drainage, flooding problems, and there are a few areas within the city that have been identified as mandatory detention. What that means is that new concrete, if there's new development happening within those areas, you have to mitigate by constructing a detention pond. No questions about it. The development community, the engineering community, they know those maps well. If they know that they're putting in a new subdivision, if they're putting in a new shopping center, they know they have to do detention. Outside of those areas, this is important, outside of those, it doesn't mean you don't have to do detention. What it means, and you're outside of those areas, there are other options to do mitigation. You can do detention, because there are detention ponds outside of those areas, or you can do channel improvements. There are other things that you can do. Now, you asked the question, what does that mean to our development? So generally, most of the development, most of the projects that we're doing, we either have existing concrete or channel and we're replacing it, we're making it wider. So we make sure that we do not have an adverse impact in that area. So for example, if we're going to build an underground infrastructure like the project we were talking about earlier, Barber Drive, we need to make sure that when we build Barber Drive Phase 3, that we're not going to flood Barber Drive Phase 2. So that is a part of, that is how we go in there, and that's why we have to ourselves prove that we're not having an adverse impact. But the mandatory area is really for new development that's coming in that requires them to do detention ponds.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, Andy Green in District 6 again. Please correct me if I'm wrong. There we have recommended projects, we have considered projects, and now we have projects that have been requested by members of the city. There are a number of projects that are considered, at least for District 6. They have scoring on them, but there's no cost estimate. Obviously, they weren't scoped out. They weren't scoped out to the level that the recommended project would have been. But can we get the quad sheets on those if we're looking to maybe move around a project?
Yes. Yes, Andy.
Okay. That's what we're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you. I see. Go ahead, sir. And then
Christopher Fullerton, D8 again. A quick question, sort of housekeeping and long-term thought process for the whole committee. We've covered a variety of different issues here today, including everything from transparency to how we hear public comment and the rest. And I would like to make a suggestion that since this is going to be an iterative process and we're already almost halfway through it, if you can make mental notes or jot down ideas, perhaps we as a committee could come together and make a booklet or a recommendation for the next round in 5 years of how the committee could work better, or how we can collect information sooner, or reach out to the community better in getting some of this information about different projects and different phases, so that we can make sure that from the get-go at the first meeting in 5 years, the next committee is even more prepared than we were. And if that means we need a scribe, I'm happy to serve in that capacity. So
Yeah, I'll just say we're always looking for ways to do things better, more effectively, and more efficiently. So we would welcome those comments.
Yeah, I think those ideas about improving the process are always going to be welcome. So we can make that part of our recommendations as we put those forward. So y'all be thinking about that.
Yes, Bianca.
I have two questions. First of all, regarding the scoring sheet. So as I was looking at the scoring sheet, is District 7 falling off Lower French Creek improvements? The low bid, it only identifies it as a District 6 project. And then my second question, I think that might just be a typo. My second question is about the scoring, because I'm looking at comparing Sealy Channel improvements, and I'm looking at under, they have the same score for resiliency and public health as some of the other projects, and yet they're removing a significant number of homes. It is probably the superstar of this entire committee with removing homes from the floodplain. And so I just wonder why that didn't score higher in those two particular categories. I know it's the highest scored project total, but why in those two for public health and safety and resiliency, it didn't score higher than it's scored comparable to several other projects? Thank you.
So the first part of your question with regard to Lower French Creek. Lower French Creek is a project that actually the work itself is within District 7, but the benefits are along the boundary, which is Heath Road. So Heath Road and I think it's Low Bid, I think is the name of the street that goes there. They are the ones that are going to receive the benefit of that, as well as a subdivision that is to the west of it, which is actually in District 6. While the work is happening in District 7, and it just happens to be that it's right on that boundary. And so the benefits are there. With regard to your second question, I think we're going to have to look at that closely on how it is. And I guess in the response we can, when we're looking at these, I guess it just matters how things are being interpreted and how the scores are identified. But you're absolutely right. That one does get many structures out of the floodplain.
Any additional questions or discussion points? Yes, sir.
Okay. Luis Alday, District 9. I have a quick question. I would like to know, because I have seen construction cost skyrocketing, and I would like to know how inflation was considered for this cost estimate, considering that these projects won't happen tomorrow or next year. So I think it's important to know how those were developed.
Good question. For last two bonds, 2012, 2017, and including this bond, we include 6% inflation for 5 years. And most of the time end up being pretty accurate. Most of the project end up going under construction 3 years, even we are including inflation for 5 years. Of course, some end up going to 4th and 5th years, but we have inflation already. Unless something really unusual happens, then it may affect our project budget. Because of the COVID, we had some issue on the facility construction, not on the roadway construction.
Okay. If some of those projects are being built within the three years, suppose, and you have those savings, are those savings going to be used for one of the projects that maybe is not on the list?
The saving on each proposition stay on that proposition. For example, for drainage, let's say we finish Barbara Drive in year 3rd. If we have a saving, it stays on the drainage proposition until majority of the project either is done or contracted. Then we know we met our obligation for public. Then the saving will really go to council make a decision. In 2017 bond, we had a lot saving, 47 million. Council decide to fund number of the new projects.
But that is a good idea, and that is something that we do recommend. So, if you draw the line and say these projects, we don't have enough funding in our bucket, but in priority order, this is what we recommend to you. So either you make the bucket bigger, or should there be savings, at least we know that the bond committee said this is a priority for you. So we could very well use that savings and recommend to council based on your recommendation that we fund the project that didn't get funded initially.
Actually, it's a good idea for you to give few additional project in case there is other funding comes available. We can push those projects for design and construction.
Thank you. I see a mic on.
Chris Deves, District 9. We heard from the folks in Monticello Park, and the evaluation we saw here was that these were $51 million or $40 million projects to address Campman Boulevard. My question is there, and then we have the ceiling project also for that area, is there something smaller that can be done to address those concerns we saw in the video?
As mentioned earlier, the Campman Drive system, because it is a system, there is a timing issue that needs to be considered. So Campman and Ceiling, they come together, and where they come in is right at Woodlawn Lake. So there is a timing system that has to be considered as the flood is coming down one system and the other. The question is if it could be a smaller piece. We certainly can look at that. Currently, I can't really jump the gun because the county has committed to us that they're going to look within Campman itself, considering what's happening in Ceiling, and develop a project and update that number. If it truly is 51 million, if it's 60 million, they're going to help us identify that. When that is identified, then we can begin looking at phasing on what phases we can do to take bites out of it to eventually get to that project.
Bianca, District 7, as a follow-up, Mr. Garza. Just so y'all understand, underneath Campman, there is significant underground drainage that already exists. So it's big enough to drive a big old truck through it. There's double channels. So when you see that kind of water on the roadway, don't think that there's not already an existing system that's there. The system was upgraded in the 90s. But as we grow as a city, and we have mandatory detention, so anybody who develops north of us has to contain their runoff. Plus, the city and the county built detention to see what they could do to hold the water. But we have that beautiful interchange at I-10 and 410 that we all enjoy. That's impervious cover. And where does that water go? Woodlawn Lake. So we all have to be responsible. It is a system. And so I wanted to make a public project request for you. The city has been studying the Woodlawn Lake outfall to potentially be a dam per se. There was $500,000 in last year's budget. There's a little under $200,000 in this year's budget to continue the study. Do you have an estimate of what it would take to upgrade that? Because as we know, as we put more water over that, or there could be new technology that could be used to raise or actually lower the level in Woodlawn Lake to help the properties around the lake get out of the floodplain too. I would make that request. Thanks, Neppy.
We'll take that into consideration, yes.
It is almost 8, so I want to give everyone an opportunity. Any more?
I have just a quick one.
Okay.
And Neppy, it's also for you.
Andrea.
So Andrea Narendorf, District 2. On Peggy Drive, I may have misheard you, but when you were discussing that project, did you mention that emergency vehicles, when a flood event is happening or when it's getting inundated with water, that the safety vehicles cannot get into, they can't access? So on the score sheet for public health and safety, it's scored a 6 out of 20. Why is it only a 6?
That's a good question. I have to look into that one. That's a good one.
Okay, a couple of things. If you have your form, your form for me, that please don't forget to turn that in. And I think John asked me to say one more. What was the other thing? You said something else.
I've forgotten now. Sorry.
If you have project requests, put those in as soon as possible if you want those to be analyzed. I know, we're supposed to, Stephanie reminded me that at the next meeting, we have to start talking about our tour that's proposed for December the 4th, that Saturday. So we would like to start talking at the next meeting about which of the projects y'all would like to tour. We will not have the ability to tour them all. So we need to make sure that whether they're on the list or some of the ones we hear from the citizens, whatever this committee would like to visit, we need to start thinking about that at our next meeting so that they can plan the tour. So please start giving that some thought. And if that's something that you want to talk about when we have our district meetings with each of you, that's an opportunity for you to share that as well. Chris, I'm sorry, you have something else?
Minnie Abrigo Sanchez, District 10. We had a speaker that spoke about transparency and wanted to know our occupation. I have no trouble with that. I know we don't make motions, but I have no issue with that if everyone else agrees.
The gentleman who asked about us putting in information, what did we do? I can't make motions, but.
No, we can have that one.
If I may, what I was going to say is that motion, you could certainly make that motion. That's a motion dealing with procedures for this committee, so that's okay. The motion that you should not make has to do with projects. That's reserved for the fourth meeting.
Okay, so the gentleman requested that we consider if this committee wants their information about their occupation and their title, their employer and their title, I believe is what he asked. And that would be public. If this committee wants to provide that information, it would be publicly available information. So does someone want to put that motion on the table and see if we want to vote?
So move.
So Minnie is making the motion.
We have a motion and a second.
Debbie Reed, second.
Thank you. Is there any further
Question?
Yes.
So if we decide not to, and if we decide not to provide the information and the motion passes, do we still have to provide that information?
You mean individually?
Yes.
John, they're asking if the motion passes and someone chooses to not provide the information
Yeah.
at their personal choice, can they?
Understood. I'm going to ask the city attorney to come up. I would just, I'm going to steal some of this thunder, but this is an advisory board. I would just remind you of that. So it's not a requirement the way you're currently set up. I don't know if you voted to do it and then someone doesn't want to do it. I don't know what the answer to that is.
Thank you.
I think to amend it to those that are willing to do so.
Yeah,
Does that make
if
sense?
you want to,
that's a good
in
idea.
the motion, basically, those who choose to, they can submit. And if even if the motion fails, if someone wants to, they can do that. But if the motion, if you choose not to, again, like John said, this is an advisory committee, so I don't know that we can necessarily compel it. But this is your committee, so you can kind of make the motion and direct procedure as you want.
Okay, so Minnie is modifying her motion to say at the choice of the members of the committee can provide your employment and your title. Is that your motion?
Leo Castillo, District 4.
Okay, let me just make sure if the second is, okay.
So
Yes, I
if we're
second.
if we're putting it to a vote where it's optional anyway, so then why are we voting on it?
I just think to get a sense of what the committee, if they're okay with us pursuing this, because then we would have to have the staff go to each of you and get that information.
What's the relevancy in this? We're here as an advisory committee.
Yes, sir.
Christopher Fullerton, District 8. This conversation happened on Monday night as well. I came to that committee meeting. And just for reference, they ended up voting it down with the logic that transparency as a rule is great, and I think we probably all agree with that. Half-baked transparency or partial transparency might actually be more prejudicial than where we are at present. So I would suggest that since we would only be providing a very small amount of information anyway, voluntarily, that this be the kind of issue that we wrap into our final recommendations and suggest that when people apply in another 5 years, that we strongly encourage, if not try to require, that some personal bio or some information that might be discoverable to the public would be available on that cycle as part of our learning curve.
Any other question, any other discussion on the motion?
Leo Castillo, District 4. If the other committees voted it down, I think we should follow that as well.
All right, you want to call for the vote?
Okay, do we have any other discussion? If there be none, then all those in favor of the motion for members to voluntarily provide occupation and employer to city staff for publication, indicate by raising your hand and saying aye. Do you have the count?
5.
Thank you. All opposed?
I got 15.
What, 15?
Did you get 15? Some.
She got 15.
I got 15. If there's anyone that abstains.
Are there any abstentions? Okay, the motion did not carry, it failed.
Thank you. At least we addressed the person that came to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Danny, I appreciate that. Okay, so I think we're adjourned.
Thank
We've
you.
covered
Meeting
a
adjourned.
lot of information today. Thank y'all. We'll see you at the next meeting. Please turn in your forms.
The thing I was going to say, which I didn't, is we're not here representing who we work for. It's true. I mean, we were appointed as